Greetings all! Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. After countless years of work, as of the last video, I have finally uploaded the last Pokemon report video for this channel. For the moment, of course. With the end of Arceus, I've finally done something on every single Pokemon family that there is out there. And it has been one heck of a journey. Normally, at the end of this kind of cycle, I would do another VTP, and that's what this is. But this is going to be a VTP episode of the Veteran Trainer's perspective that is going to be very different from anything else I've ever done for this channel. Mainly because there's not going to be fancy slideshows, there's not going to be game footage, there's not going to be all the things that I'm, used to be able to doing here. I wanted to do something very different, and so I am. This episode of the VTP is going to be special. Because I want to talk about something more important to me than probably anything else I've ever really talked about on this channel. And that, simply put, is my life story with Pokemon. I've done this for so long now, and you've seen my face for so long, but I don't really ever get the chance to talk directly about myself, about how I fit into everything. And that is what this video is going to be. Now, if you're not into what might as well be called a giant lecture, or for some people a podcast tape, that's fine. I just wanted this one to be very simple and direct. So, with that said, I think it's time we start from the very beginning of everything. So, to start things off here, I'm just going to go straight into, what life was like when I was, just a wee little tyke, and it wasn't exactly all that stable. So, I initially lived in a trailer with my mother and my father. But, well, that didn't exactly last that long. My father, I never will say that I hate him, but he was not always the best of people. He was a functional alcoholic. And because of that, times were very tough. Eventually it got to a point that my mother had taken me, and we were now living in Grandma's house, and that is where I am now. That's where I've been pretty much most of my life. My father was not a bad man in any way. And I say this because, as a functional alcoholic, he did do some terrible things, but there's one thing that he never did. He never put his hand on my mother. Any abuse that he threw her way was always verbal. He never put a hand on her, and I will at the very least give him that. But yeah, my early childhood was a little tumultuous, but I can't really remember a ton of the details either, so I can only give a vague idea of what it really was like. When my grandmother passed and we inherited the house, then my great Aunt Vera stayed for us, and eventually she passed away probably before I entered into middle school. I do miss her a lot. She was a great deal of fun, but time on Earth is limited and all that. I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up. I was an only child, and so was my mother, so it was very much kind of just on our own. And because of that, I didn't really have much to do with others. I needed things to do with myself. And ironically, that's sort of where it all started, because, Pokemon, I never really can remember now what it was like to be first introduced to it, but I remember that the moment that I really saw it and got even remotely engaged, I was hooked. I could not let go of it. It was something that immediately took my interest and my obsessions, you could say, an obsession that has really kept going all the way up until today. So, even as a young child, there was something about that franchise that just spoke to me. I don't really understand what it was. Maybe it's just the fact that it was the first thing that I really, had my attention caught against. But one way or another, even as a young child, I was obsessed with this franchise, and it laid the roots for everything that I know and I am today. My life in school has sort of been a nature of duality in terms of how things have progressed over time. When I was a young kid and I was, in elementary school and even middle school, I wasn't actually that academically focused. I was very much like any other, typical child of sorts, I had my interests, but school wasn't really necessarily at the top of the list, And I guess that's just a product of childhood, but that would actually change over time, once I get into high school, for reasons I'll talk about later on in this video. I really just focused entirely on my academics, just academics and Pokemon, and that was pretty much it, School was not always a great time for me. There were a lot of issues that I had between not just students, but also teachers and other administrators, and issues that my mother had as well, but that will come into play even more so when I talk about my life a little bit older. What I need to make clear here, however, is that in elementary school, and middle school to some extent at least, Pokemon was just everywhere for me. I chose to obsess over it. I chose to make it the defining feature of my life, And you know how a kid is with that kind of stuff, It's just something that, some people thought, oh, it's just gonna be a fad, he'll grow out of it. Yeah, no, that never happened. It never happened, and my early years of childhood really reinforced that. I didn't just partake in one thing or another, I partook in everything. Heck, Pokemon Red was actually the very first video game that I ever had personally. I mean, I had some old games on the Super Nintendo from my half-brother, who sadly is no longer with the family, but Pokemon Red was the first game as a kid that I really had, and I would just play it all the time that I could, whether it was at home or whether it was at school or whatnot, and it was everything to me, And even today, it still holds that kind of hold upon me, but it was just so much more prevalent then that you really could say I was born to be a Pokemaniac, or as I am now, a Pokemon professor. Now, let me talk a little bit about the Pokemon anime and how I got into that as well. So, ironically, unlike a lot of people, I actually did not get into the Pokemon anime by actually watching it on TV. That was a time where I didn't even know, where it was airing or what times or whatnot. I was very much an isolated child, both physically and mentally to some degree. Because of this, I actually got introduced to it, ironically, at Walmart through VHS tapes of the episodes. And ironically, I accidentally chose the second tape, episodes 4 through 6 of the original first season of the anime before the first 3, but yeah, I didn't know, I had no idea. And it didn't actually matter. Ironically, I won't show it here because, I've seen what happens when people show valuable stuff on, these kind of videos. You never know, people can find stuff. But I actually have the entire first season of the anime on VHS. All of it. Every single episode, every single tape, the whole thing. I still have it, and I'm not getting rid of it. I don't care if VHS is obsolete. The fact that I have all of it is still, to me, incredibly impactful. That show, I won't say that it hit me super hard, but it definitely got me even more engaged. It started with Red, and then I got introduced to the anime, and that's really just what had me sink my teeth into all of it. The adventures of Ash and company, on the road to becoming a Pokemon Master and all that. Though we all know how the first season really ended for Ash, unfortunately. I mean, yeah. But it was beautiful, it caught my attention, it got me engaged, it became a core component of it all. And admittedly, I have moved on from the anime since then. I don't really pay too much attention to it, but for those early years, it really gave me the idea that you could go on these adventures. You might find friends along the way, or you might do it on your own. I unfortunately was the latter in pretty much all cases, but nonetheless, it gave that sense of adventure to me. It got my eyes glued to what was going to happen next, or how Ash was going to do this or that, or even putting myself in those shoes, what was I going to do? And that idea of being able to just take the protagonist out of the picture and put myself in there and see what would happen, that is where I really sunk my teeth into everything. And it just kept right on going from there. And of course here, if I'm going to talk about the games, then I'm going to talk about the anime. You know I'm going to talk about the card game, you know? You can't avoid that. And for me, that is probably the most active aspect of the franchise that I'm still engaged in. I play the games quite a bit, sure. I keep a bit of a tab on the anime, but the cards, I've never stopped collecting. I have so many binders full of cards, all cataloged, mind you, and that took like half an entire summer of constant work just to catalog everything at one point. And you may have to ask yourself, why? I mean, I don't play the card game, I just collect them. And maybe you could definitely say, or you almost can certainly say, that the amount of money that has been sunk into collecting these cards is not close to what they're worth. But that doesn't matter, and it never really mattered. I collected the cards because, hey, it was part of the craze when, Pokemon first hit the States, and so I had to be a part of it, and I still am. And I still get excited every time I open a pack of cards and I can find something rare, something nice I don't have yet, There's always that moment of excitement. It's not necessarily about the prices, it's about the act of collection itself, and that's something that will definitely come into play later on when I talk about a few other aspects of this franchise. But I never stopped collecting. I still am, and I have quite a bit of beautiful and valuable loot stored there. Again, I'm not gonna really show anything, but I just see it as part of all of it, The whole idea, gotta catch them all. It's not just the games, but for me, the cards, and I've put a lot of effort into that. A lot of money that maybe won't get back, but it's not about the money, It's not. It's about the act of collecting, the idea of just having these things for the sake of having them. And that is a primal aspect of this entire franchise, and an aspect of myself. I want to just have stuff. Maybe it's not quite worth the price people might think, but I've always taken great care of my cards. I do my best to keep them protected in sleeves and binders and all sorts of things, so this is just a part that I have more than sunk my teeth into. I am constantly gnawing at the bone at this point. And I don't collect maybe quite as much or as hard as I used to, but that's just the reality of adult life, which, again, will be covered a little bit later. But yeah, the card game really was an active part of it all for me straight from the get-go, and it still is, and I dare say I'm not going to stop collecting until the franchise itself is said and done. So, here we are. I've talked about a little bit about the games, just a little bit at least the games. I've talked about the cards, the anime. It's kind of funny to think. Some people, they collect these things, and maybe they don't always remember what was first or what started it all. Ironically with the cards, which, again, I've been collecting for forever at this point. I actually still have the very first card I ever got. It was a base set Venonat. I still have it. But one other aspect that I need to talk about is toys. And the reason why I want to talk about this is not just for the sake of Pokemon. No. See, I was an only child. I am an only child. And because of it, my mother spoiled me rotten. I will not shy away from that. I have so many toys in storage, because most of them I still have. And it wasn't just Pokemon, In fact, Pokemon was actually the side hustle. No, it was things like Power Rangers, for instance. Power Rangers has always been a huge part of my life as well, next to Pokemon. It was Power Rangers, it was, things like Batman, it was, Jurassic Park, all sorts of stuff. And I really loved just playing with toys, it was just me on my own, so that was my form of entertainment. I used them to really hone in, to really make a world of my own. And unlike a lot of people, I've had a hell of a lot of trouble letting go of them, because I still own pretty much all of them. All the toys that I have is what I've almost always had. I mean, I had to get rid of some of the stuff like the miscellaneous Batman or Jurassic Park or other things, but the stuff for Power Rangers, and Pokemon, none of that is gone. Heck, look behind me. These plushies are but a small sample of the plushies I have stored around in this room and in other parts of the house and beyond. Toys have always been a humongous part of my life. They always have been. And it's hard for me to let go of that kind of thing because of the memories they hold. And the reason why those memories are so important, well, I will get to that pretty much now, because there's one aspect to all of this. As much as I love all of it, it's not just here because I wanted things. In a lot of ways, it's because I sort of needed it. So I've made a couple mentions and allusions to the idea of me being on my own with a lot of stuff. I want to talk about that directly now, because it is something that wasn't just an aspect of my childhood. It is an aspect of my life growing up and as it is right now, and that is isolation and playing alone. So I live on a farm of sorts, and I didn't really have any close neighbors or friends that were nearby to me. I didn't really have people that I could just, walk down the street to play with. That just wasn't how it was. And I didn't have any siblings. I mean, I have 2 half-siblings, technically. Unfortunately, one of them, again, my half-brother's no longer with us, and I don't even know where my half-sister is at this point. But I just didn't have a lot of people in my life as a kid, I didn't have much. I was spoiled rotten by my mother because that's what kept me entertained, that's what kept me happy, that's what kept me going. And in hindsight, yeah, all the toys and the games and all that, it definitely filled that void. But I also look at things now and I kind of have to think to myself, well, what if that had been the case, I mean, human contact is something that I'm not always the best at, and because of all this, it's not something I get to partake in as often as I would like to, physically, like face to face and all that. So, as a child, all these toys and games and all of this, it was to compensate for that fact. And it's kind of sad because, the whole idea of Pokemon, what really revolutionized is the idea of training Pokemon, and I really did not get to do that for much of my life with this franchise. I just didn't. It didn't hurt me, I didn't mind it all that much, but in hindsight, it does seem kind of sad. I didn't get the chance to really trade with people or play with others very often. So, a large part of my existence, of how I see the world and how I think, is definitely very much because of that isolation, I can do things on my own just fine. I even prefer sometimes to do things on my own. But that can also be to my detriment. It's also why I have attempted to do collaboration work on this channel before, and those videos I think have turned out great, but at the same time they're unfortunately one-offs. And they haven't really happened for a long time. Now that's more or less because of other issues when it comes to the YouTube platform, but that's later on as well. The point of the matter that I want to make here, though, the point of the matter is that being alone has effects on you. And on the one hand, it's allowed me to develop my own look into the Pokemon franchise that is, I would like to say, probably not quote-unquote diluted by the research and works of others, but at the same time, as much as I love that kind of work ethic that I can actually do work on my own, it has made things a little bit difficult in some cases, and, well, lonely. It's one aspect of my childhood that I really wish had not been so prevalent, because it did come to bite me in the rear later in life. But this is just the product of all that, and at the very least, it means that I can still talk to people like all of you, here, the audience that I have, and that does bring something, that does help fill that void a little bit. And even with the isolationist mindset that I have gotten better, and nowadays I really do this because I love to engage with the community, not just the Pokemon community as a whole, but my own community, the people that are nice enough to watch and listen to me just ramble on about everything on this channel. So I have to give you all thanks for that. My isolation as a child really did set things up, but I found ways to cope with it, and I think I've done a pretty good job of making the most of it. Now that I've talked a little bit about my life, I want to talk about the games a little bit more specifically. In particular, I want to talk about how I got into the role-playing games, the RPG genre itself. Pokemon definitely was the gateway, but it's not the only franchise I've dabbled in with that respect. No. I've also done a lot of things, especially with like Super Mario RPG. That was something that I ended up getting as a gift from a friend a long time ago when I was a kid. I wasn't that great at it because I didn't really understand how to play the game all that well. Pokemon was all I had really known up until that point, but that was the moment that I realized, hey, Pokemon is great and all, but there are other things out there. I might want to try some of this, and I did. Super Mario RPG, again, for the Super Nintendo, but that's also how I got into the Mario and Luigi saga for, starting on the Game Boy Advance and then moving on into other franchises. And I'm happy to see that that franchise is still, going to be making more games. Rest in peace, Alpha Dream, but at least it's not totally over. But more than just that, I looked into just so many other things, and ironically for me, like, the whole point I see of role-playing games is that you're doing just that. You are not just playing as yourself, you're somebody else. You are projecting yourself onto another individual. And that in itself, yeah, sure, that's great. But again, the thing of the matter that I have to make very clear here, that's not actually what got me into playing these kinds of games. Pokemon did something for me that no other game really had done up until that point. It forced me to commit to strategy, to really think about how I want to go about, completing certain goals or defeating opponents or things, or everything of that nature. And yeah, so because of that, it's actually the strategy aspect that sunk itself into me, got the hooks in the flesh and all that jazz. It was the idea of being able to take what I kind of learned from school, what I learned through trial and error, and then apply it directly just to see what would happen. It was the whole idea of really thinking in playing a video game. It wasn't just reaction, it wasn't just knowing the controls, it was really thinking how to best approach a situation. And I am an intellectual, in my personal opinion, so that kind of gameplay just spoke to me even as a child. I've played a lot of things in that genre, not just that Super Mario RPG, with Pokemon, Digimon, the Mega Man Star Force series, for the brief time that was a big popular thing. All of it really just centered around the numbers and understanding how to overcome what might otherwise be insurmountable odds. And for that, I am grateful for Pokemon. It really opened my eyes to this entire genre, and while my interests and playing of games in that genre might not be super broad, I have immense respect for it, and easily it is my favorite type of game genre that has ever come into my view. Now that we've moved on a bit forward in time here, I want to talk briefly about what my life was as a teenager between the end of middle school and then all the way to the end of high school. And I want to just start off by saying middle school was absolute hell on earth. It was the 4 worst years of life for me in terms of school. I hated it. And I know I'm not alone there. Middle school does have a bit of a reputation because, it's a time you're going from a kid to a teenager, things are changing physically, I won't talk more about that, but more importantly also mentally, how you see yourself, how others see you, a lot of social anxieties and judgments that, honestly, they don't really deserve to exist. Look, if you're going to judge somebody, judge them by their actions, not just who they are, give a nice summary judgment, not just nitpicking stuff, but, when your kids becoming teenagers, you don't really understand that. It takes some time to have the level of maturity in most cases. Because of this, though, for reasons I will disclose shortly, at the end of middle school, my mother, who is a high school math teacher at a different district than I was, going to school at, she'd had enough. Bullying and the issues of how I was treated not just by students, but actually more importantly how I was treated by staff and whatnot. She had just had it. And so I ended up attending high school where she taught at. And that was something that needed to happen. I dare say if I had stayed in the school district where I was originally, I would not be here talking to you all as I am. I would not have had these successes at the very least that I have had in life. I would not have. And I do not know where I would be. That said, high school itself, ironically, was great for me, but that's because I knew most of the people at the school at the time, Again, my mother taught there, and she was actually and still is at this moment of the recording, the head of the math department there. So she knew everybody. And because I often typed along with her, for after-school projects and things of that nature, pretty much everybody knew who I was as well. And that kind of comfort was really important to me. I wasn't academically focused initially, but when I got to high school, I knew all the people there. I knew them well. And so I needed to show them that I had gratitude for being there. I wanted to demonstrate to them that, hey, I know who you are. We've had, conversation, or, we at least acknowledge one another. I want to show you what I can do. I wanted to make my mother happy. I wanted to show her that I respected her, that I loved her, and that I wanted to really push myself, that I had this opportunity to do so. And I did not hold back. I made it very abundantly clear, I wasn't there for the school culture. I wasn't there for interacting with my classmates. I was there for interacting with my teachers and for my work. I wanted to prove myself that I could do great things. And I think I did a pretty dang good job when I was in high school. I think I did a pretty dang good job. But you also may be asking, why the sudden shift? I mean, sure, impressing them is one thing, but that's something that's just continued on past high school, into university and all that. Why would I want to do that? Well, this is now the part of the video where it's going to get a little bit deep, because my teenage years were also the years where it became very clear that I was not like the other students, that I was different. And by different, I don't just mean physically or mentally. I definitely also mean behaviorally and biologically. So, yeah. The title card is not a joke. It's not misleading. I am autistic. Specifically, I have Asperger's syndrome, and no matter how much they try and just shove it into general autism, I will still say that I have Asperger's syndrome. But yeah, point blank, I am on the spectrum. Now, autism is something that I really wish I could explain to others personally, what it feels like to have this in me, to be on the spectrum, but I really can't do that. Even as an intellectual, I find that hard to do for two main reasons. First of all, autism is different for everyone. We may have a general idea of, of symptoms they have in common with one another, but as a whole, those on the spectrum, it's called a spectrum for a reason, because there are so many differences between how severe their issues are, what holds them back, what strengths or weaknesses. It's all so variable that we need a spectrum in order to understand just how variable it can be. And second, perhaps most importantly, there is a perspective that it's hard to gauge what it's like to be autistic compared to the norm, when being autistic for you is the norm, when it is all you've ever known. Now, I had clearly shown signs to my mother that by the age of 5 or 6, something wasn't quite right. And it wasn't until I think it was around the age of 7 or so that I learned that for the first time as she was teaching, she was introduced to a student for a class that she was told was autistic. And she looked at the student and how they behaved, and then she looked to me, and back and forth, and just sort of realized they're the same. They're the same general symptoms, the same idiosyncrasies, the same issues and whatnot, and she just knew in her gut, I have to be autistic. I must be autistic. And so she wanted to get me tested. But the school district that I was at the time, they flat out refused. They did more than refuse. They thought she was crazy. They said that I was a monster, that I was psychopathic, that I was schizophrenic, that I would grow up to be to harm or murder animals. I'm no joking. These are things they said to her face. It wasn't until I was in my teenage years, about I'd say 6th grade or so, that the issues that I had with the district, because they weren't treating me like somebody with autism, they were treating me as a problem child. They did not have respect for me. They treated me like I was just a freak, a monster. So, when I was about 13, she put her foot down, she found a specialist on her own, and on her own time and money, took me to the specialist. And I was there for 3 hours or so, just talking to them so they can get a good understanding of who I was, what interests I have, how I observed and interacted with my environment, all that stuff. And after those 3 hours, I was, politely asked if I could leave the room so he and my mother could speak. And sure, I did that. And what I learned from her later was that he basically looked to my mother and in so many words says, I can't believe that this district didn't send them to me, didn't send them to him sooner. I apologize for the word gaffes. This is actually something I'm going to be keeping in the video because this is a part of my autism. When I get really excited, I tend to trip over my own words, But back to the point, he couldn't believe it. He could not believe that this district did not think I was autistic. That they were saying all these other things. He couldn't believe it. He was flabbergasted. He looked at all those 3 hours, and he just said straight to my mother, there is no question that he is autistic. There is no denying the fact that I'm autistic. Unfortunately, that didn't make things easier. If anything, it made things harder because now I had a label from that school district. And I was treated like an idiot. I was put in a specialized classroom for emotional support. They didn't have emotional support at that school. They had learning support. So I was doing my own work from my actual classes, or a lot of the other people in there were doing things not at grade level, and I will leave it at that to be very nice to them. I had no problem with the students. It was always the staff, and that's the same for my mother. There was always the staff. Being autistic is an experience that I can barely begin to really describe. It is something so unique and so astounding to some degree that it is a miracle that I have thankfully turned out as I have. I cannot speak for everyone on the spectrum here, but I will say this. It is the reason why I am so hyperfixated on Pokémon. It is the reason why I have put so much love and care into this franchise. And I would never want it any other way. With all the problems it has caused me, from anger issues to social issues to all that, it has given me something in here that I will never let go. And for that, I am proud to be autistic, and I am proud to say it may not define me, but it definitely helped to make me who I am today. Now, for anyone who has seen my work here and even on DeviantArt, you know that I don't just talk about Pokemon as a fanboy or things of that nature. I talk about it as a scientist. Science has just been something that I have always excelled at. From the earliest days of elementary school to today, it's just something that has always proven to be my specialty niche. And it's not even limited. It's science in general. Chemistry, biology, geology, paleontology, everything, physics, what have you. I am a jack of all trades with it, and I value myself for that. I may not be the greatest of experts in everything, but I do my best to excel in what I can. And I'm very proud of that. I look at Pokemon, it's supposed to be this fantastical environment, these fantastical creatures. You're not supposed to be able to understand them. And yet, the existence of the Pokédex defies that completely. It is really a way of incorporating science and true information to make these creatures feel real. That's what really appealed to me in my later years as a teenager and an adult. Not just the fantasy, but really seeing how would they work in real life. And that's a big part of why I got into writing and now making video content about them. Even if it may not reach a lot of people, again, I'll talk about that later on as well. Even if it doesn't reach a lot of people, I do it because I love to engage in science. I love to engage in Pokemon. Why not do both? And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of that, at very least in the writing aspect. I do my best to really make it feel like these creatures are real. That you could go right outside your door, you could see Pidgey or Sparrow flying by, that there might be a Bidoof down by the riverbank. All this. I do this because I love science, academically and personally, and to be able to apply it to something else that is hold so dear to me, something that is so precious to me, it's the greatest thing I could ask for. It's not always easy, and maybe it doesn't really pay off, at least not in some aspects, but it's satisfying, and for me, even if it's sometimes hard and not always fun, I feel like I have a duty to do so. And that duty really then ties into another aspect of me. Because you all know me as Professor Wormwood, but that's not how it used to be. I did once just used to be someone who enjoyed the games, just played them non-stop. But then something happened. Something happened in my life. A discovery was made that absolutely changed the game forever. So, as a teenager, I was just playing the games like any other person would, really wasn't thinking too much on it. You have to understand, I live in a household that dial-up is basically all we had for quite some time. We're kind of out in the sticks and whatnot. But when I finally got internet access that was at least slightly more reliable, I found DeviantArt, and I saw that there was an opportunity. I found a group called Pokemon Professors on the site, and I saw that there was something of interest there. That there was a tier list, of how much work or submissions that you want to put forward, and it would, push you up the ranks within the server, And I thought to myself, that could be fun to try and reach. That could be fun to try and do something for. I did not know it at the time, but that would end up becoming the impetus for everything that I do now. I wrote, because I'm not an artist in a, artistic sense, I suppose the way I would put it. I don't have very good drawing skills. I'm not gifted in that nature, but I am a good writer. And so that's what I did. I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. Submission after submission, going back, writing here and there, tweaking this, rewriting that. Well, over time, it did something to me. It allowed me to actually develop a unique writing style all of my own. Not influenced by anyone else. I developed it all on my own simply for writing about Pokemon. For writing these reports of blending science with the fantastical in order to make something new. And it had an impact. I go by Mutitis on the site, but that wasn't the name I wanted attached to my work. I felt that, I'm doing this field work, I'm doing all this, I consider myself pretty knowledgeable. I'd like to be a Pokemon professor. And so, that is what happened. I've taken on the moniker of Professor Wormwood. Some of you might be wondering where exactly that name came from in the first place. Well, if you didn't know, the Wormwood plant is a sort of bush-like creature of sorts that is sometimes mistaken for a tree, but only because it has a very thick, almost woody outer structure to its form. But it's not a real tree. Just as I label myself as a Pokemon professor, but as far as the canon of the franchise goes, that name doesn't exist. So I am a professor, just not one of the canonical kind. I thought it was pretty fitting and clever at the time. And I still do. But I took on this moniker, and people talk to me. I talk to so many people. I've met so many people. through my work there. And YouTube just expanded on it at least a little bit here. But I absolutely adore doing all this. I adore it. It has come now to a point where, to be very honest, even in real life, more people know me as either Professor or Wormwood or what have you than by my actual name. That is what it has now, come to. I have become my persona. I am Professor Wormwood, one way or the other. We are one and the same. And you know what? I feed into that. Not in ego, but in pride. That my work is so impactful that is the name I am known the most for. That means a lot to me. As someone that was mistreated growing up and not really given the recognition I thought that I really deserved for my work and, just being a human being, I have always had gratitude for it. And I always will have gratitude for it. It has become my life with this franchise. And to be honest, I wouldn't want it any other way. Now, as I transitioned from being a teenager into an actual adult, by legal age, things were very much up and down. On the one hand, I got into a university for undergraduate studies that I, to this day, absolutely adore. It was, for the most part, 4 years that I just loved in reflection. It wasn't always easy, and there were some rough patches here and there, but it really became a place where I could use my academics to their fullest, because it wasn't about school cliques, it wasn't always about making friends, it was about putting my nose to the grindstone and proving myself to be worthy of recognition. I've always taken pride in others seeing and enjoying what I can do. And it's not entirely an issue of ego. I mean, there is some ego to it. I will openly admit that. But it's just this desire to be recognized, to know that people will look to what I do and what I have done, and they will understand I'm not just here for an education, I'm here to learn, and to learn from the best. There's one rule I had in college, and I really do recommend it. Value your connections to other students, sure, but more importantly, put more value in your connections to your professors. Because they're the experts. They're the people who know the subject matter they're teaching. If you really want to learn from them. Talk with them. Interact with them. It may not be always easy. I went to a relatively small college for my undergraduate studies. It was a private college. And so classrooms weren't really that large. I mean, I think the largest classroom I was ever in had like 30 people. The largest, mind you. And the smallest, I think 8. It makes a difference. It really does. It gives you the chance to really be, one-on-one with your professors, to learn directly from them. And I love that aspect. Those 4 years were fantastic for me. However, I wanted to go into a graduate school right after that. I graduated with a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Geology with a concentration in paleontology because that's just something I've always loved. However, when I went to graduate school for it, unfortunately, it did not go as planned. I didn't make it past the first year. It wasn't because of my work. No. It's because, unfortunately, my anger issues with my autism got in the way. I don't want to give the details on what exactly happened, but I will say that I had to leave. I had to take some time after that to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. I decided to try graduate school again, but this time I would instead go for education because I love to learn, but I love even more to teach. And I'd always wanted to be able to teach at the college level. That was my dream job. That was what I wanted to do. I didn't give a crap if maybe the pay wasn't going to be that great. I didn't care. The pay wasn't the problem. The pay wasn't what I was concerned about. I wanted to teach others because I love to do that. That's why I do my writings. That's why I do stuff here on YouTube. I love to teach others. And that did go well. I got my master's in education in a 2-year program. And by the way, 4.0 GPA. I'm very proud of that. A's in every class I took for that graduate degree. But unfortunately, issues would come up again. I was supposed to get my teaching license right after that. However, the class that I was assigned to at that time and the teacher there was a massive discrepancy. Now, I'm not going to mention what happened or what was done or any of that nature. I'm not going to share that, but I will say that I was unable to complete my work there for my teaching certification, and the university that I was attending attempted to find another place for me that would fit my specialties and what I was looking to get into. And in the entirety of the county where I'm at right now, they couldn't find anyone. Because of that, I have not been able to really do much in what I want to do. I have found ways to occupy my time, but as far as academics go, I may unfortunately have hit the ceiling. And even if I wanted to go back to really try again, unfortunately now I can't do that. As of right now, the medication I need for my autism and its symptoms costs about $2,600 a month, which is utterly insane. I have a special insurance that pays for almost all of it. I actually only pay $1 a month for my medication because of that insurance. But it also means I can only make so much money in a year, about the equivalent to a part-time job with minimum wage. If I go beyond that, there's a high risk I lose that insurance, and if I lose it, I'm not likely getting it back, and I don't have $2,600 a month for my medication, which is important because I need my medication to function. I am incredibly self-aware of this because I know what happens if I don't take it, and I need it. So unfortunately, in my adult life, I'm kind of at a standstill at this moment. I am looking into different ways to try and rectify this, but for the moment, there's a reason why I try to upload here regularly. This is all I really have going for me. But in the time I've been here, some things have happened, some good and some bad, and they have helped to shape me now in the ways I approach others and my work and this franchise as a whole. So in the time gap that I've had now since graduate school, as I mentioned, I've had to find other ways to occupy my time so I'm not just, sitting here twiddling my thumbs and all that. Well, one of the things that I got into was shiny hunting. Now, before all this started, I wasn't new to this. I did actually have some shiny Pokemon in my collection, But it's not like I went out and directly hunted for them. However, with the time I had after graduate school, we finally got access to some nice high-speed internet, wireless, We didn't have to use freaking dial-up anymore. And that allowed me, at that time to really start to look into, okay, well, what can I do now that I have this high-speed internet? And it was around there, Generation 6, that I was able to finally start, I liked trading with people, and now I could interact with people online. I didn't just have to hunt stuff for myself. And I figured, you know what? I have the time and energy. Why not go for the big goal? And that was to make a living shiny dex. One of every possible shiny that you can actually acquire for every species. And you know what? I actually did it. Not only did I do it through breeding, through hunting, through trading here and there, and also only legit stuff, I double checked to make sure. My collection is legit 100%, no hacks, no fake shinies, nothing. I do everything I can to make sure I'm getting the real deal. And I did it. Not just for Gen 6 and Gen 7, but then also in Gen 8 and now Gen 9, I've already done most of the work. If they're going to make new shinies, I've already done almost everything. I might as well keep doing it. It's not about the clout. It's about the sake of collecting, like I mentioned with the Pokemon card game. It's just the sake of saying, I did this. I don't have to have an ego about it. I don't have to have, the greatest of big heads about it, but I do it for the sake of collecting, and to say that I did it, and I'm still doing it. I still hunt. when there's something new out to go for. And it is a fundamental part of now how I play these games. It's something I always do. Beat the main game, get all the Pokemon collected, complete the decks, get that shiny charm, and then just go to town. Every single time, that is now what I do. And it has brought me connections to a lot of different people. It's actually helped me develop my social skills, ironically, through trading and whatnot. So it has had a positive impact in my life. And I am proud to say that I am a professional shiny hunter because of it. In fact, not just that, I have still the very first shiny I ever got. And no, the red Gyarados of the Lake of Rage does not count. No, first one I ever actually got was a red shiny Duskull in Ruby. And I also have my very first shiny legendary. I wasn't hunting for it, it just happened. And it's probably the proudest piece of my collection. And that is a shiny level 47 Distortion World Giratina. I wasn't even hunting for the shiny, ironically. I was just doing a playthrough, just to get one with good, IVs and whatnot. And it's also the record holder for the least amount of soft resets that I've ever had to do for a shiny of its caliber. And I'm proud to say, how long it actually took me? How many soft resets it took me unintentionally to get a shiny Distortion World Giratina at full odds? 5. 5 soft resets. That's it. It is the luckiest I have ever been, and I am proud to still have it in my collection. Alright, this next part, if you want to, you can skip it because it might feel a little awkward, but I want to briefly talk about something that longtime viewers of this channel may have noticed from my videos, that they may have noticed that's a little different. And that is, these days, I'm not the only one on them. So, I've always understood to some degree or another, at least since my teenage years, that some people look to Pokemon and they don't see the hard barrier that separates us from them from a, how should I put this, intimate perspective. I don't want to get, hit by YouTube or anything, I'll leave it at that. But I never really thought too much about it. And then Generation 7 happened, and they introduced Pheromosa. I don't know why, but for some reason there was just something about that particular species that spoke to me. And over time, I developed this idea of a character, I'm a Pokemon professor, sure, but as we also know, Pokemon professors, they do tend to have significant others, in a lot of cases at least. And so I had to think to myself, I love Pokemon, and this design speaks to me, it gave me ideas, but I wanted something for my own. And so, because of that, I created Mina, my in-character wife. Yes, if you hadn't been understanding or didn't really get the context of why Mina is in my videos these days and why she has my last name, it's because I married that woman. Now, keep in mind, this is a fictionalized, existence, and sadly she's not real, but as I also said before, I am my own persona at this point. So for me, while she may be fictitious, she is still very much real, both up here and in here. To me, she represents something important. It's the kind of the warmth, the care, and the love that I have gotten from my mother. And I don't mean in a direct sense, I'm not weird about it, but I mean just the idea of me not being alone. Because that does terrify me, because I know one day that will be the reality. My mother's the only family I have. And when I lose her, I will have no one. To me, Mina is a buffer of sorts. It helps me to, keep that realization in mind, but at the same time push it to the back of my head so I can just see the world and, say to myself, I'm doing all this work. I don't know if it'll be worth it in the end, but you know what? I know I'm not totally alone. Even if it is just in the mind and heart, even if she's not physically real, that doesn't matter. At the very least, she represents that desire, that need, that passion to have others in your life to help you through both the good times and the bad, and for that I am forever grateful to her, as I am to the artist who helped me create the artwork that you've seen of her in my videos. So, I have to say, it may be weird to some, but for me, it's just natural. And I adore her no matter what anyone says about it. Now, briefly, I want to mention, the work I do here as well. It is something that has come about as a result of my time online. I will admit, I was, one of those people like, well, look at all the stuff on YouTube, they're making money off this. Well, why not me? I have something to contribute. Sure. Unfortunately, what I've learned over time is that the issue for me isn't really the content that I create. I'm still very proud of that, but I'm not exactly a multimedia guy. Making videos was never my forte, and to be honest, it still definitely isn't. It really isn't. Writing is what I do best. So, the algorithm on YouTube has not been the greatest to me. Thumbnails and whatnot and visuals, and I don't have a lot of help. I don't know who would ask for this stuff. I have to just figure it out on my own, and it's evolved over time as a result. I mean, I used to have to use freaking a paint drawing to represent me. Now, at the very least, I can do this. But there was a lot of trial and error and money spent to do so. Money that I will never recuperate, but you know what? At this point, I've kind of come to terms with this. This is not what I'm going to make a career out of, And hilariously, even if I did, remember the health insurance issue? Yeah, that would come into play too. So hilariously enough, at this moment, even if the channel is small and I don't have it monetized and whatnot, and can't really, maybe that's not entirely terrible. In hindsight, maybe that's not a total disaster. The thing is, I enjoy doing things here. It allows me to take the work that I did on DeviantArt for so many years, and I can upscale it. I can redo the writing and all that, and put it up here with some visuals and whatnot. And it's not much, but it's good, honest work. And for me, that's what really matters the most. Besides, unfortunately, DeviantArt these days really isn't the best place to be as a writer, for reasons that anyone who knows DeviantArt will understand very immediately. But nonetheless, YouTube has allowed me to connect with a lot more people than I normally would have, and it's definitely helped me form a stronger social circle. It has been beneficial to me, not just for keeping my work going, but more importantly, for helping me to overcome and treat some of the issues and symptoms of my disability. So as a whole, while it can be hectic at times, I don't regret starting it, and I do enjoy making it, even if I have to make changes here and there in order to keep myself from, overworking it all. So the last thing I want to talk about here is regarding role-playing, RPing and whatnot. Now, for me to say that, oh yeah, I role-play a lot, yeah, that probably wouldn't be much of a surprise. I mean, I have my own persona, I do all this work, I have a fictional wife. Role-playing is kind of built directly into all of that. But at the same time, it is so much more for me. I thank that Discord actually exists, because I probably could not do this the way I do it on Discord, but I have servers, I have close friends, we roleplay all the time, we have characters, artwork for stuff, we'll create these, bios for everything. Everyone who does RPing, 9 times out of 10, they will say that the immersion of it all is a big part of why they do it. And that is true for me, but I want to emphasize that I do role-playing because it's helped me develop my social skills. It's helped me become a better person as a whole. Now, there have been rocky moments, quite a few of them. My disability has not been the kindest to me in regards to, social cues and understanding how people feel about certain things. But I've come out of a lot of sessions in the school of hard knocks a much better person, a much more self-aware individual that creates for the sake not just of creating, but for community, for gathering people to have fun, to move past the dredges of, at this point, modern life and society, and just do something else. Be something else. or even if you don't do the self-insert thing, I'm really not into that, but it gives us the opportunity to just have fun, to develop characters and stories and really put our minds to something that we can change, something that we can actually do something about. Because a lot of the bigger issues in the world, one person, there's only so much one person can do, you know? But at the very least, in this small niche, we can make worlds and characters and interactions that allow us to feel closer as people. And you know what? For somebody that is otherwise sort of antisocial to some degree, it is a godsend, and it is something that has made a huge impact on my life as an adult. For better or for worse, depending on how you want to look at it. So, with all of this said, I have given about as much of a cursory examination of my life with this franchise and how all of it is connected together, but there is still one thing left to ask, and it is the one thing to ask for everyone. Where do we go from here? Because, let's be honest, Pokemon, it is a franchise that has lasted for quite a while, but everything has to end eventually, you know? Everything. And I think about this a lot these days. How long is this going to keep going? Yeah, it's one of the funny things. We really don't understand the longevity of video game series. There are some that are here for some time and then just kind of fall off the radar. Sure, maybe they'll get re-releases or HD remakes or what have you at this point. But when it comes to franchises that have an extraordinarily long history, I dare say we don't really understand what kind of impact it then makes when that franchise ceases to exist, when it's just gone, when it's over. And Pokemon one day will end. I don't know what my future there is going to be like. I don't know. Will I pivot to something else? Will I just stubbornly stay on the boat? It's hard to say. It really is. We haven't really gone through a lifetime of gaming like this yet. We really haven't. Not entirely, at least. Not in the sense of, like, Pokemon, for example. Pokemon is, you know, a relatively new thing compared to some other franchises. Well, here's what I have to say. I don't know where my future lies with all of it. But I will say this. I ain't going nowhere! I am with this franchise until the very end. And I say that with great confidence. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to keep contributing to it because, you know, we don't know how the world's going to go. We all sort of had ideas of, oh, your franchise is going to go there, or the industry is going, you know, that direction. And yet, there are some things in the real world, you know, like, well, certain outbreaks or pandemics that can change everything for certain industries. There's always a possibility that maybe it'll go longer than we imagine it would. Or maybe it will be shorter, we don't know. But one way or another, if this video proves anything, I'm not letting go. Never. This franchise has done so much for me as a person. Through the hardest of times, it has kept me together. It has allowed me to weather the harshest of storms, physically, societally, mentally, all of the above. I owe so much to it, and I want to give back in any way that I can. So, for everything that it's worth, this franchise is where I plant my flag. This franchise is the one thing that I will never let go. Even when it comes time for me to pass on from this world, whenever that may be, this will always be here in my heart. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything. There are many details I could give otherwise, you know, from my life's perspective and how this franchise is, but the point I wanted to make in this video is to show, at least to a cursory degree, how Pokemon has been a part of my life, how it has shaped me, and what I've gone through alongside with it in order to come out as the human being that I am today. Now, it is true that maybe one aspect of my work here is done for now, the main video reports, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop making content. I'm talking about, TM technical movement, talking about moves. I've got work coming up for abilities and whatnot, and I'm still going to be making revamped versions of older videos, so in that respect, the franchise work here is far from over. But I want to make something clear. This channel, as much sometimes frustration as it causes me, for lack of recognition in some circles, it is a reflection of my desire to keep going, to always push myself to do new things, to make more, to do more. That is my weight. That is my cross to bear, I suppose, if you want to put it in that perspective. It is the planet on my shoulders. A regular atlas, I suppose. This world, this franchise, has done so much for me. And you know what? The only thing I can do in response is to give back. So, to all those who have been watching me, who have enjoyed my work, even if it is admittedly low tech, I'm not a high tech person, to all of those who are watching this, you have my greatest of thanks. And soon enough, I will be right back to working, and more importantly, in time, you are going to see me do some things that I haven't tried before. I don't know if they'll be a success or not, but I know this for certain. I am committed to all of it, and there is nothing that's going to stop me. So with that, thank you all for listening to me, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day.